time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Today is a day for mourning and remembering. Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger.
The following program may contain coarse language, adult themes, and bad attempts at humor. Listener discretion is advised.
What is President Trump's goal? What is his vision? He wants to put an American flag on Mars.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I am your host, JEFF, also known as A Cosmic Bard over on Twitter/X, and this is the Lost Wanderer podcast for July 27th, 2025. Happy Sunday evening and welcome aboard the Serenade. Now, I know, it's been a bit of a long drift through the void. The ship seemingly went quiet after the 15th of June. But one fractured ankle and one unexpected ER visit later, the Lost Wanderer went from cruising through the cosmos to being grounded by gravity, and maybe with a little bit of help of painkillers. But we are back. The course is reset. And while I still have a little bit of a limp, the signal is strong. Now, this episode isn't just about what's happening out there in the stars. It's about reclaiming momentum, recalibrating, and asking the big questions. Is 31 Atlas really a threat? Or just the latest Rock the Trigger and Avi Loeb press tour? Why are our telescopes whispering dark secrets in the cosmic background? And how many times can we launch the same Falcon 9 before it demands a retirement plan? Now, the universe didn't stop while I was down, and neither did you. So let's catch up with me at the helm, EP setting course, and with a little bit of the help of the ship's computer in the back, whispering some star maps through the static, for this is the Lost Wanderer program. Cue the music. Dun, dun, dun. Something eerie with a slow cosmic pulse, like the hum of an old radar dish lost in deep time. They're calling it 31 Atlas, a new interstellar visitor streaking through our system like a ghost ship. And I don't care if it's 3I. I'm calling it 31 because that's better. But this ghost ship has no return address, no known origin, and no clear intentions as of yet. And of course, that means right on cue, Avi Loeb is here to tell us it might be, just maybe, possibly, alien technology. Not any kind of alien biology, not a rock behaving badly, but tech. Intentional, most likely hostile, probably a probe, giggity, and, oh my god, possibly a weapon! Where have we heard this before? Oh, right. Back in 2017 with Umamau. Elongated, fast-moving, tumbling oddly. Abby said it might be a light sail, and the world turned its ears and listened. The astrophysics community blinked. And now, just like herpes simplex B, he's back with a new paper and the same message. But here's the thing. Loeb's not wrong to ask this question. He may be wrong to treat it like a press conference. There is such a thing as scientific caution. Instead, this is more like salesmanship. Urgency wrapped in mystery with a side of end of times energy. and all without really a shred of confirming data. So let's be clear, 31 Atlas is weird. Its orbit doesn't match typical comets. It is fast, it is erratic, and certainly not from around here. But weird doesn't mean weapon. The leap from unknown to all of a sudden, oh my God, extraterrestrial threat, trust me, I know that. Hello? It isn't science, it's storytelling. And Loeb, he's writing his own chapter in the quote, aliens are real and they may hate us, unquote, manual. Now, he's not Galileo fighting the church. He's more Al Gore, but for UFOs. Sounding the siren, whether or not there's even smoke. And maybe that's what frustrates me and the rest of the community. Not the question. Everyone loves a good mystery. But in the certainty and his uncertainty. The public declarations, the book deals, the branding. What we need is careful eyes on objects like 31 Atlas. We need debate, honest debate. But what we don't need is panic dressed as prestige. This isn't Contact. This isn't Independence Day either. It's a lonely rock. Or maybe not. But it's a story that's still unfolding, and science should be the one turning the page. So what is it? Is it a lost shard of something ancient? Is it a natural body with odd momentum? A postcard from somewhere we can't yet imagine? We don't know. And that's the point. Until we do, maybe we, throttle back the doomsday press releases a little and let the data do the talking. Because let's face it, even if it is an alien invasion, what are we going to do about it? So now that I've hopefully quieted the alien alarm bells a little bit, and I know some of you out there are going, he's just spreading misinformation. The alien from Alpha Centauri is telling us not to look. I get it. But let's actually take a moment to appreciate what we're actually looking at. It is our third confirmed interstellar visitor. It was discovered on February 16th in 2024 by the Atlas Observatory in South Africa. It came in fast like a wrecking ball in a steep approach from far above the ecliptic, crossing through our solar system like a marble skipping off its gravity well. Its orbit is hyperbolic, unbound by the sun, meaning it's not from here, and it probably won't be back. And by the way, it's big. It's an estimated 10 to 50 kilometers in diameter. Atlas dwarfs the first two interstellar objects that we've detected, Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019. Unlike Borisov, which flared with an unmistakable coma of an active comet, or Oumuamua, which did, really a bunch of weird things, Atlas has been remarkably quiet. There's been no outgassing, no spin-induced acceleration, and really no real surprises. And that silence is part of what makes it special. It gives astronomers a chance to study an unaltered body with no bright coma, no dust obscuring its shape, no jets to confuse the motion. Just a dark, fast-moving relic from another star system, drifting through ours for a fleeting moment. Its closest approach to the sun was back on June 22nd, just outside Earth's orbit, and its path closest to Earth about a week later on June 29th, 71 million kilometers away. Far enough to be safe, close enough to be studied, at least for a little itty-bitty while. That said, it's already fading from view. Observatories around the world, including the IAU's Minor Planet Center and NASA's Scout program, confirmed its extrasolar origin. Based on its velocity and trajectory, it likely came from deep space, flung loose from another planetary system. Maybe ejected during a gravitational shuffle where giant planets stirred up their debris field. Maybe it was cast off by a passing star. Or maybe, just maybe, it's been on this path for millions upon millions upon millions of years, drifting alone, only now getting to feel the warmth of crossing a star once more. That said, no one knows exactly where it came from. Its current data suggests a path through the constellation Serpens, But tracing its exact origin back through interstellar space is like trying to reverse engineer a Leaf's journey across the turbulent sea. Now, there is a bit of poetic weight to that. This object, quiet, dark, and ancient, may have once orbited a sun not perhaps so different from Earth's, somewhere that we will never see. And now, after its long journey, it's sipping back into the dark, unchanged, unbothered, unseen by any life except ours. And that's the real story. Not weapons, not probes, just an untouched piece of a different solar system, letting us know that the space between stars isn't necessarily empty, and that it's full of motion, full of matter. And every once in a while, it brushes past us. We caught this one by chance. Next time, maybe we'll be ready. Maybe we'll see it coming sooner. Maybe we'll send something to meet it. But for now, we just let it go as another visitor in the night, gone before most ever even looked up. Now, in all this hustle and bustle of alien invasion, you could be forgiven for losing track of the Falcon 9 launches these days. I mean, let's face it, they're about every second or every third day, sometimes twice. They become so routine, so precise, they're basically a blur into the background hum of modern spaceflight. But Starlink Group 1025, launched on the 25th of July, deserves a moment in the spotlight. Not because of the payload, but because of the ride itself. Booster B-1067 lifted off from Cape Canaveral Space Launch Complex 40, carrying 23 more Starlink satellites in the orbit. That by itself isn't necessarily news, but this launch marked its 22nd flight, tying it for the most flown Falcon 9 booster in the fleet. Now remember, this stage first flew in June of 2021. Since then, it's carried cargo to the ISS, deployed satellites across multiple constellations, and returned home again and again and again on a cushion of fire and precision. And it did it again. 8.5 minutes after liftoff, 1067 landed safely on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, stationed out in the Atlantic like a mechanical welcome mat. A quick kiss with the ocean wind, and another flight was logged. Where once rocket stages were discarded and forgotten, flaming wreckage in the ocean or aluminum corpses in the orbit, this one returns over and over again. It's a still veteran of what is now you could call the orbital highway. And with each reuse, SpaceX sharpens the edge of launch economics, the reliability, the cadence, the quiet normalcy of doing what was once considered unfathomable. So yes, 23 more satellites joined the Starlink swarm, and that does matter as well. But the real marvel was in the launch hardware, a rocket that's flown more than most astronauts, a booster that's starting to feel less like a disposable tool and more kind of like a trusted crew member. And as we have that dream of Mars, of lunar bases, of maybe a star-hopping civilization, we should remember the future is built on platforms like this. One stage, 22 flights. If you want to get to space, you might have to get in line behind 1067. Now, that said, while Falcon 9 continues its reign as the most reliable workhorse in the orbit, all eyes remain fixed on the beast still pacing in the high bay, and that is, yes, Starship. On the 15th of July, Elon Musk gave a all too familiar but no less attention-grabbing update. Next flight is about 3 weeks out. Now that estimate puts us near the beginning of August, give or take us, a static week, week or two, and also a static fire, and heaven forbids weather delays. No real official date has yet to be announced, and given the regulatory hurdles and hardware checklists that are still in play, that's probably wise. What we do know is that we'll be carrying meaningful upgrades. There will be more heat shield tiles. There will be improved vector control for the Raptors. There will be adjustments to stage separation. And, let's face it, after the last few with the trial and error, this one feels more like a systems level test than maybe even a daredevil stunt of the past few. That said, the key objective is still re-entry. Not reaching space, but surviving the way back down. If Ship 30, or whatever this designation is going to be when it flies, can stay intact through atmospheric heating, then SpaceX moves one step closer to a reusable high-mass orbital system. Now, this isn't a production vehicle yet, of course. It's still very much a work in progress, but the pace of progress is actually accelerating. And with each test, the distance between concept and capability shortens despite all the incidents. And we hope the next time Starship takes flight, it won't just be another flash in the sky. It'll be another checkpoint on the road to something much bigger. Maybe we'll start to see real momentum behind it. So while we wait for the final checks and the stainless steel dreams on this, the business of space isn't just built on the booster. Sometimes, unfortunately, it is shaped by boardrooms, budgets, and of course, a president with a Sharpie. Because it turns out not every high flyer gets cleared for launch, especially when politics and pride end up colliding. Now, in the strange orbit of American space policy, few stories have spun quite like this. In a recent interview with the Washington Post, President Donald Trump revealed that he had planned to nominate billionaire pilot and Polaris program commander Jared Isaacman to lead NASA, but ultimately pulled the nomination after Isaacman apparently publicly praised SpaceX CEO Elon Musk. Yes, it's real, and yes, it tracks in a timeline where spaceflight is equal parts engineer and, I'll say it, ego management. Isaacman, best known for bankrolling and commanding the All-Civilian Inspiration 4 mission in 2021, was by all accounts a very serious and probably leading candidate. He's flown jets, he's built companies, he's led missions, and is currently prepping for an even more ambitious Polaris Dawning mission that could take aim, higher than any humans have traveled in quite some time. But praise Musk in public? That, by all appearances, was disqualifying. In his words, in Trump's words, he was going to be my NASA guy until I saw him on television saying what a great guy Elon was. And apparently that was enough to scrub the launch before the nomination ever left the pad. Now, it may seem like I'm upset by this. I am. I'm pissed by it. There was one thing I praised Biden on during his 2.5 weeks of presidency, and the rest of the time, I don't know who was doing it, but in the 4 years that Biden was the commander-in-chief, the one thing I praised was his selection of NASA chief. Isaacman was going to be a very good head of NASA. Now, setting aside this middle school drama, this spat gives us a glimpse into how fragile leadership decisions can be, even in agencies that depend on cold calculations and complex physics. Because let's face it, the head of NASA doesn't just sign off on telescopes and trajectories. They are the face of public science policy, the interpreter of launch delays and lunar budgets. And in this case, the seat was allegedly offered, then yanked away over a televised compliment. Now, to be fair, Isaacman didn't necessarily ask for the job in public. He hasn't publicly confirmed or denied the story at all. But the details come from Trump himself in the middle of an election cycle with no shortage of media oxygen to burn. And so the story now orbits public record, just one more hypothetical timeline that seems that will never unfold. And of course, the greatest irony in my mind is Jared Isaacman's actual space career may have more impact than a bureaucratic posting ever would. He's not waiting for a cabinet position to fund next-gen suits, test EVA protocols, or push private spaceflight past its comfort zone. He's already doing it. He's just doing it now in a flight suit again and not the suit and tie he would have. I still think it's a wrong decision. And as for NASA, well, I guess they've moved on. Under the Biden administration, Bill Nelson was confirmed as administrator in 2021, and he was, of course, a former senator and astronaut. He was a safe pick, a good pick, I may add. He was politically seasoned, and he aligned with the existing Artemis goals. The agency, outside of a couple mandates by the Biden administration, really didn't suffer, but it did perhaps miss out on a different kind of energy, maybe one that's needed at NASA, one that could have presented a bold, risk-tolerant private sector pulse that Isaacman undeniably carries. Leadership in space is rarely about just rockets. It's more about the vision. It's about patience. And apparently knowing when to keep your compliments off camera. Now, whether or not the offer was real, the lesson is, in a universe full of vacuum, the loudest thing in the room is still pride. And I'm waiting for Orty to put the quote in chat. Now, as we continue in the political realm, the FY 2026 space budget rolled out by Trump made headlines for one reason. It's kind of bold. Despite my hate for what he did to Isaacman, the plan is a necessarily decent one. Crewed lunar missions by 2026, renewed emphasis on American boots on the moon, a streamlined focus NASA with fewer delays, more launch pads, and less bureaucratic drag. But what got less attention, and at least outside the science press, was actually what some of the cuts were, and whether those cuts are surgical or perhaps reckless. Now, the planned NASA budget would drop by about 24%, but science programs would take a much harder hit, nearly 47%. That includes reductions to Earth observation, planetary science, heliophysics, and astrophysics. Flagship missions like Mars Sample Return, the Roman Space Telescope, and data analysis support for Juno and New Horizons are all facing some form of cancellation or indefinite shelving. Now, at first glance, this kind of sounds like a war on science, but the reality, like everything, is a bit more layered. Much of the staffing reduction, roughly a third of NASA's civil servants, doesn't just target low-level admin roles. It is aimed at senior technical staff, and many of them in the GS-13, the GS-15, which include engineers, mission planners, and division heads. These are the people who know how to manage deep space missions, process data, and translate equations into flight paths. Removing them can not necessarily be seen as trimming, but could, from certain vantage points, be seen as tearing muscle. That said, some of these roles were managerial, and there's been longstanding criticism that NASA, like many, if not most, federal agencies, has grown a bit top-heavy. And from that perspective, a focused staff reduction isn't necessarily sabotage. It could just be long overdue house cleaning. And yes, there is a DEI angle to all of this. As we may remember, under Executive Order 14151, NASA had already dismantled its DEI programs, or at least was in the planning of it, scrapping training, community outreach, and internal diversity roles. Offices were closed, staff reassigned, or just let go. And depending on who you ask, that was either a correction to political overreach or a loss of morale building, talent attracting infrastructure. Those people who thought that are probably let go. But in hard numbers, it's not going to be a fun cut if everything goes through. But this is where some of the vision does get a little cloudy. If the goal is to shift NASA toward private partnerships and crewed missions, this logic makes sense. A leaner agency, more hardware, less overhead. Companies like SpaceX have proven you don't need government-scale infrastructure to reach orbit or even land a booster. You need precision and drive. That said, private rockets do need some public science. This budget does have some ambition. It really does push Artemis forward. It should get people excited, and it challenges the agency to work leaner and smarter. These are not bad things. But there is some concern when half of your science budget and thousands of your most experienced specialists could be on the chopping block. It is a fair question to ask, what kind of NASA are we building going forward? Is it going to just be a launch agency? Is it going to have any more learning? What is the ultimate goal of this? These are legit questions, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Now, that said, there are a lot of things in space we cannot ignore. And asteroids, well, let's face it, we should probably pay attention to these because they don't give speeches, they don't respect borders, and they don't care who's polling well in November. Asteroids in general move fast, quiet, and potentially are lethal. And when one heads our way, we won't be able to talk our way out of it. Now, for years, NASA has been the go-to agency for tracking near-Earth objects. They had the data, the detection networks, and, well, the orbital math. Their DART mission even proved that we can nudge a small asteroid off course with a kinetic strike, but as Futurama told us, not sure that was a wise decision. But here's a question nobody seems to be answering, even with Atlas and Avi Loeb spilling his thing. What if something bigger shows up? Who actually is going to call the shot? Because let's face it, NASA isn't a military agency. It really doesn't have rapid response teams outside, astronauts, but it doesn't carry weapons for the most part. And when a threat needs to be neutralized in weeks, not decades, committees and conferences, let's face it, will not cut it. So that is where the U.S. Space Force enters this conversation. They were created to secure American assets in orbit, but there's growing interest in expanding their role to include planetary defense. Not just, tracking threats, but actually dealing with them. They have the structure, the authority, and the budget flexibility to make real-time decisions, none of which NASA is equipped to do. And, if we're going to be honest, and that's what we love to do on this show, in an actual emergency, do you want the response run by grant writers and panel reviewers, or by someone who can give the order without a 12-week proposal process? But right now, there's no real unified strategy. There's no real clear playbook. NASA watches the skies, FEMA handles disaster logistics, and Space Force is just kind of currently staying in its little lane. But those lanes are starting to blur, and they need to. Because if an object the size of a football field is inbound within 10 days' notice, we can't afford to have agencies arguing over whose jurisdiction it falls under, and you know damn well it would. And sadly, there is some hard truth here. We've already been lucky once. In 2013, a meteor came in over Russia. No warning, no interception, just a flash, a shockwave, and over 1,000 people injured. Now, admittedly, this wasn't an extinction level event, but you could probably classify it as a warning shot. And the sad reality is we were not ready. If we ever do get something bigger inbound with no early warning, no DART practice run, someone is going to have to step up, not study it, not model it, but stop it. And if we're still holding press briefings and debating agency turf when that moment comes, then all the tracking data in the world won't save us. So the question remains, when it's time to pull the trigger on this, who actually gets the call? So with that, let's go top off our coffee or, whatever you're gently nursing tonight. Let's take a breath, take this moment, stretch, refill, maybe even step outside if you're in a place dark enough to see some stars. We will be back in a few minutes.
carving time into dust and delight. I swallowed moons, I whispered heat, wrapped whole worlds in my arms. They sang my name in ancient starlight. Now silence waits to disarm. Something's wrong. My pulse is racing. My heart is burning through its core. I feel the weight, the walls collapsing. A tidal wave I can't ignore. A crown of plasma flares in fury. Solar screams in every tone. I hurl my guts into the dark and leave behind a hollow throne. This is my last breath, my final light.
And welcome back. We start the second half of this show with our familiar friend, the ones we love talking about, Boeing. Or as we tend to refer to on this program, the slightly tilted, perpetually delayed, possibly cursed sibling of SpaceX. Yes, Starliner is back in the news again. And yet still, somehow, it's not the good kind of news. Shocking. The company has now officially confirmed what we already suspected. Starliner won't fly again until 2026, and when it does, it's not allowed to carry any astronauts. This comes, of course, after a long chain of malfunctions, delays, failed valves, sticky thrusters, had that issue once, telemetry gremlins, and public relations duct tape. The most recent flight, of course, CFT-1, did get the 2 NASA astronauts to the ISS. But that was supposed to be, mission that proved Boeing could finally deliver a functional crew capsule, but the return trip was postponed a bit, then delayed, then reclassified. And of course, we know Butch and Suni, stayed up there for 8.5 months. They are again, Boeing that is, effectively stuck in the world's most expensive orbital waiting room, while Boeing tries to figure out whether Starliner can ever be trusted to bring any astronauts back. And let's face it, that trust is wearing thin. So, the fact is, Boeing is still troubleshooting the first generation of hardware. SpaceX is on to its 3rd gen. And of course, we have to be fair. Starliner did technically fly. It did technically dock. It technically didn't explode. And probably for Boeing, that should be considered progress lately. But there's no version of this current timeline where 2026 looks like it will ever lead to success. The worst part is this program began in 2010 with their first test flights originally targeted for 2015. It is now 11 years behind its intended schedule, and even with NASA's support, multiple resets, and billions in funding, still hasn't cleared this bar. At what point do we just nix it? We need someone, I don't know, say Jared Isaacman to head NASA that would look at Boeing and go, no, bad Boeing. Get back into the doghouse where you belong and stay there. I mean, at least the Russians can do it right. Boeing? And speaking of Russia, Progress 92 launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in the early hours of July 3rd, riding a Soyuz 2.1A rocket toward the ISS. Now, let's face it, it's not a sexy spacecraft. Nothing Russian ever is outside of their women from the age of 18 to 29. It doesn't return. It probably won't be remembered in 20 years, but it works. And that's more than we can say, for some of the American alternatives lately. Now, Progress was carrying nearly 3 tons of cargo that included 950 kilograms of propellant, 420 kilograms of water, and 50 kilograms of pressurized nitrogen gas to maintain the station's internal atmosphere. No real fancy experiments, no billion-dollar payloads. This one was just more of a really nice essential Uber run. Now, tucked inside this pressurized section was roughly 200 to 300 kilograms of food and crew provisions. These were all, of course, shelf-stable meals. There might be some fresh fruit or vacuum-packed vegetables, some hygiene kits, maybe a few personal items. Once again, much to the chagrin of the Lost Wanderer podcast, no menu was released to the public. But let's face it, these missions typically follow a tight pattern: protein packs, grain rations, nutritional bars, occasional morale boosters, maybe a few surprise items from ground control. None of it really Instagram worthy, but all of it is necessary. And to answer a question in chat from Canadian Heavy Haul over at our friends at SHR Media, yes, Artemis missions will actually go to the moon, probably sooner rather than later, depending on how Starship launch goes. But thinking about food, I found this next story really intriguing for, many reasons. Because you know who else needs a good supply of food? Maybe even, some vacuum-packed delectables and, freeze-dried kimchi? Campers. And not just, the trailhead kind. For those that don't know, here at the Lost Wanderer podcast, we have an admitted soft spot for one specific breed of campers: South Korean. They're stylish, they're efficient, they have the latest gear, and if we're being completely straightforward and honest, they may well be easily the most photogenic on Earth. And it turns out they may not be staying on Earth much longer, because South Korea has announced a bold and surprising goal: to build a permanent moon base by 2045. Not a lander, not a rover, an actual base. Operated, supplied, and supported by South Korean technology. Launched aboard South Korean rockets. This isn't a quiet science mission or a tech demo. It is an honest-to-God end-game goal. One time to coincide with the 100th anniversary of the nation's liberation from Japanese occupation. And here's the kicker: they're not treating it like a maybe. President Yoon Suk-yeol says the government will invest $70 billion into aerospace sector over the next 2 decades. That includes building their own heavy lift launch vehicles, a domestic nuclear propulsion program, deep space communications infrastructure, and orbital autonomy tech. That's kind of a serious list. It also sort of signals something bigger. South Korea doesn't just want to participate in space exploration. They kind of look like they want to try to be the leader. And they're coming in at an interesting angle. Their KSLV-2 Nuri rocket already launched satellites successfully, and their lunar orbiter, the Nuri, entered lunar orbit in 2022 and is still returning high-res terrain maps. Now, these missions really didn't make huge waves outside of Asia, but they were proof of concept flights. And now they're going full commitment. And their timeline is sort of aggressive. Base construction by 2045 means infrastructure needs to begin showing up in the mid 2030s. The lander design, the cargo systems, the lunar power grids, habitats, surface rovers, and they'll need redundancies. They'll need radiation protection, thermal stability, and a way to keep humans alive for months at a time on the moon's far side. That's not camping anymore. That's more off-world colonization prep. And while most people think of the US, China, or even ESA when they picture moon bases, South Korea is quietly building one of the most advanced, compact, and efficient engineering cultures on the planet. Seriously, look at their South Korean camping videos. Also, just, and ask anyone who's, driven a Hyundai EV or flown a Samsung drone prototype. But let's face it, this is more about intent than it is even the tech. This isn't military flexing or even a touch of that Cold War nostalgia. It is about South Korean national pride, long-term economic vision, and planning a foothold in the next frontier of human expansion. 2045 sounds, a little bit far away until you realize it's only 5 U.S. presidential terms from now, or 2.5 Olympic cycles. A child born today will only be 20 when South Korea hopes to break lunar soil. If they pull this off, it won't be just another flag on the moon. It will actually be a message. We came prepared, we packed smart, and we brought dinner. And the K campers may just beat everyone to the quietest site in the entire solar system. And now, speaking of hot things in space, it turns out Uranus is warm. Okay, look, I really want to play this one straight. I really, really do. But I think the headlines may make this nay impossible. Scientists have discovered that Uranus is warm. Not just warmer than you expected for a giant gassy planet tilted on its side, but warm in a way that science can't fully explain. And if you think I got through that sentence without smiling a little bit, you don't know the show very well. Now, technically, Uranus is classified as an ice giant, which sounds majestic until you remember it's basically a frozen fart cloud wrapped around a rocky core drifting out where sunlight is a rumor. Voyager 2 flew by it back in 1986, gave it a once-over, and we haven't been back since. Sounds like my first marriage. There's no orbiters, no probes, just one awkward glance and 4 decades of speculation. But now, thanks to some infrared telescopes, astronomers have picked up something weird. Uranus is emitting more heat than it should be. Now, we're talking about a planet nearly 2 billion miles from the sun. It should be cold. It should be dark, quiet. Somehow it's glowing just a little in infrared. Kind of like it's got an inner furnace that no one has accounted for. And now the scientific community is asking the question we all know was coming. What's really going on inside Uranus? I'll give you a moment. Maybe me a moment. Now, the best theory so far, from it's holding onto heat from when it was formed to we don't understand how fluids behave over 10,000 miles of pressure. Some suggest internal mixing, deep convection, or phase changes in supersonic water, which, if you're wondering, is exactly as sci-fi as it sounds. But the important part is this: we actually do not know, because we have never bothered to study Uranus properly. Once again, kind of like my first marriage. And when I say we, I mean all of us, NASA, ESA, and even those guys at JAXA who build satellites that look like vending machines. no one has sent a dedicated mission. But that is, now there is a push. Planetary scientists want an orbiter, maybe even a probe. Maybe a moon lander to study one of the icy satellites, something that could spend a few years out there, peeling back the layers and figuring out why the planet is breaking the thermal rules. Now, there is actually a good reason to do this, because out of all the exoplanets that we found so far, the most common ones are Uranus-sized ice giants. That's what the galaxy seems to be full of. If we figure out this one, we might unlock the key to understanding thousands of others. But the catch, funding a mission like this is hard because no one wants to stand on the Senate floor and say, "We need to explore Uranus." There's no way to say it without someone coughing in the back of the room. Even the mission names are probably cursed. Uranus Orbiter, Uranus Pathfinder, or the Deep Probe Initiative. But let's face it, science doesn't care about your middle school sense of humor. The data does say something weird is going on out there, and if we're serious about exploring the solar system, we've got to check it out. So yeah, Uranus is warm, the science is solid. I'm really trying my absolute best to deliver that without snorting any. But one day we will get spacecraft into a, stable orbit, and we'll send that probe through its atmosphere, maybe even landing on something on one of its strange sideways moons. Until then, we'll just have to giggle like that middle schooler we all are inside. Now, we spend a lot of time scanning the planets, scanning the stars, listening, waiting, hoping that if someone's out there, they're broadcasting back. But what if they don't have to? What if the signal we've been sending wasn't intentional, but what you would consider leakage? And yes, I just made a leakage joke about Uranus in the story following Uranus. I need a pay raise. And what is already maybe, we've gotten someone's attention. That's the idea behind a recent study by astrophysicists looking now at messages we beamed out on purpose, but at the background noise of civilization, specifically airport radar systems. The rotating radar installations that keep air traffic safe and organized, turns out they could also be creating one of the loudest, most coherent artificial radio signatures on the planet. And it's also not just noise. These are signals that are directional, repetitive, and intensely regular, exactly the kind of a signal that a patient faraway intelligence might notice. Now, the researchers suggest that if an alien advanced civilization were conducting its own version of SETI, listening for signs of artificial transmission, they'd most likely pick up on our radar leakage before they ever noticed a purpose-built broadcast like the Arecibo message or the Voyager golden records that gave us, pornographic nudes with our home address with a mixtape added to it. Because unlike a one-time signal fired off into the void, airport radars never stop. It's persistent, it's structured, and it's already left the solar system. To put it another way, we've been broadcasting our location for decades accidentally. And the signal is only getting stronger. We now have more airports, more satellites, more ground-based tracking systems, GPS corrections, transponders, emergency pings, all of it. Noise to us is a map to someone else. Now, if that is a cause for concern, one might ask, depends on your level of optimism. Some argue that this is really a non-issue, that any species capable of detecting our radar leakage is already far beyond us technology-wise, and probably knew we were here long before the first airplane ever left the ground and probably have already visited us. Others say this is a case of shouting into a forest without knowing who's out there or what they might want. Now, we've long debated whether we should actively try to contact other civilizations. Just not Alpha Centauri area. Okay, that's all I'm saying. Sends out, messages to whoever we want. Raise our hand and wave, "Hey guys, we're over here." But this wasn't actually a choice that was considered. This was an electronic heartbeat of modern life, and it's already out there. Now, from this next story, because screw you, Rick. In a lab tucked away from the noise of everyday world, sometimes extraordinary things just happen. Physicists have created the first antimatter qubit. Now, that sentence may not hit like, a rocket launch or a Mars rover touchdown, but if you understand what it means, the universe just blinked a little. So let's break this down. Qubits are the quantum version of bits, the building blocks of quantum computers. Instead of just being 1 or a 0, a qubit can be both or somewhere in between. That uncertainty is what makes quantum computing so powerful, so weird, and so full of promise. Up until now, all working qubits have been made from normal matter, ions, electrons, superconducting loops of currents, stuff like that. But in the new experiment at #CERN is innocent, researchers successfully used a single positron, the antimatter counterpart of the electron, to build a functioning qubit. This wasn't just a particle trapped and measured, it was coherent, controllable, and quantum mechanically usable. They turned antimatter into information. The experiment involved confining a positron in a magnetic trap and using its spin as the carrier of quantum information. It's no longer just a proof of concept, it's a completely new door, because antimatter behaves just like regular matter in almost every way except its charge. That means the physics should match, but the possibilities of new testing grounds in quantum theory are now wide open. And it also comes with an amazing practical twist. Positrons don't experience the same magnetic interactions as electrons. That could make antimatter qubits more resilient in certain environments, with less noise, more stability, at least in theory. Of course, no one's building an antimatter quantum computer tomorrow, or probably next year. The tech isn't ready, the positrons aren't exactly easy to come by. But like so much in physics, the real story isn't about the immediate use, it's about what just became possible. Because now we know we can encode information into the stuff that shouldn't exist. That's not just clever, that's rewriting the rules we thought were already etched into the walls of the universe. Antimatter, once the realm of particle collisions and sci-fi propulsion systems, is now speaking the language of logic gates and entanglement. It's as if we just taught a ghost to whisper in binary. A tiny moment, a fraction of a particle, but it might be the spark that lights the next era of quantum exploration. Antimatter isn't just exotic anymore. Now, it can compute. Now, it is the tail end of July, and the nights are starting to whisper. Still warm, but there's a bit of a shift. Crickets now hum under longer, quieter stars. Out east after sunset, the summer triangle is climbing high. Its three main stars, Vega, Altair, and Deneb, acting like a celestial welcome sign. Vega and Lyra, of course, is the brightest. Altair and Aquila flashes with the heartbeat. The rhythm and Deneb, out in Cygnus, holds its glow like a patient lantern. If you're out around midnight, look overhead. Saturn is rising in Aquarius, bright and golden, drifting just above the haze. Jupiter follows in the early morning hour, chasing the last of the Perseids before sunrise. And speaking of, the Perseid meteor shower is already ramping up. It'll peak August 12th, but even now, under dark skies, you can catch some early streaks, especially after midnight when the radiant in Perseus climbs higher. These are fast, clean meteors, often leaving glowing trails that linger like old secrets do. On August 4th, look for the waning crescent moon near Jupiter just before dawn. It's a quiet pairing, but a beautiful one. A silver curve brushing past a world of swirling storms. And for, full moons, we got August 9th. It'll be the sturgeon moon, known to be Anishinaabe as Monomiki Gizis, the ricing moon, where wild rice harvesting begins. God, I swear, EP hates me. It's not even episode for the phone. Here we are. So if you can get outside, even for just 10 minutes, let your eyes adjust. Let the skies remind you everything up there is still in motion, and so are we. So that's it for tonight's show. Thank you for tuning in whenever and however you do. Stay tuned for Sunday night with Alan Ray. Special thanks to NASA, Space.com, SpaceX, Ars Technica, NASA Spaceflight, Popular Mechanics, and more for the stories and inspiration tonight. Once again, with me at the helm, the EP setting course, and the ship's computer in the back, whispering the star maps out through the static. This is the Lost Wanderer. Until next orbit, I hope you enjoyed the show, learned a little bit, and maybe had a laugh or two along the way.
The universe is a pretty big place. It's bigger than anything anyone has ever dreamed of before. So if it's just us, it seems like an awful waste of space. Right?
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful.